Hi, everyone, and welcome to Hounds for the Holidays, Episode 3, Adding More Cheer. There we go. So in this episode, we are going to talk about another aspect of helping take the stress out of your holiday life and your dog's holiday experience as well, because what is your dog going to be busy doing while you are busy holidaying? Chances are, if you haven't thought about incorporating some of the things that we've already covered and some of the extra things that we're going to be talking about in this episode, there's a pretty good likelihood that your dog may be getting into things or doing things that you really aren't thrilled about, and that's going to add stress and be distracting. So in episode 1 and episode 2, we talked about the importance of management, deciding whether you and your dog and your schedule make it possible for you to be able to train some actual usable behaviors, to prepare them for what's going to be happening in your holiday, and making that decision whether management might be a better option for you for some of the things or maybe for all of the things. We talked about helping our dogs be able to settle throughout the holidays and potentially using the magic mat as an awesome way to help our dogs cope with some situations that might typically be a challenge for them and be situations where they might do or choose less than thrilling things, counter surfing, jumping on guests, destroying the Christmas tree. So in episode 2, if you haven't already watched that, walk you through the process of how you can teach and potentially use the mat as an awesome tool. But there's one more thing that we really need to discuss, because without it, you will not be helping your dog and yourself be as happy, calm, and settled through the holidays as possible. And that specific thing is mental stimulation. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about because I really feel it is underutilized in general for most dogs. People really haven't taken advantage of it to the degree that they could. Now, of course, there are some people that totally get it and have really implemented it to an impressive degree in their dog's life. But what I have found over the years is that most families and most dogs really aren't setting up that stimulation to their best advantage. And for this particular time, mental stimulation is especially important to keep everybody happy. So what I want you to think about, hopefully through this talk, is whether you really are giving your dog an appropriate dose, a daily dose of mental stimulation. Now, you may already be providing your dog with a peanut butter cone that he can lay down and lick as an entertainment toy. Maybe he gets beef chews or yak bars or even a licky mat, and all those things are awesome. If you're already doing it, fantastic. Good job. Keep it up. If you're not, I can't recommend them highly enough. Licking and chewing are 2 out of 3 of the most fulfilling but still calming activities that we can give our dogs to do. So this is something that you really want to take advantage of. And it's so simple to offer these activities in a safe and an appropriate way. So if you're not already doing it, get on it, please. But that on its own is not really what I would consider hardcore mental stimulation. It's a calming activity. It helps the dog settle, but it's not getting them to use their brain in the way other types of actual mental activity or mental exercise would do. So before we go into more detail about that, let me just backtrack a little bit and just briefly cover some of the things that we talked about in the very first episode about planning and how important that is, because it's all going to fit together. So If you haven't already done so, go back and have a listen, because I explain it in a lot more detail and it'll be clearer. But just to recap, it's going to be really helpful and take a lot of the stress out of your holiday if you plan ahead. Now, of course, you've probably got your own calendar, but I really encourage people to have a separate calendar for their dog, because of course you're going to be able to take things like the cocktail party and transfer that from your calendar onto your dog's calendar, so that you know for sure you've got that day organized, covered, whether you are going to be using some management and sending them out of the home because it's going to be way too much, or whether you're going to make some other type of arrangement in home. Having those types of things marked on your calendar really going to help, so that you can be proactive rather than running around last minute trying to figure out what to do. Now, other things that should be going on your dog's calendar are things like, if you have a daycare or a walker, are there going to be days where normally you'd be relying on those services and they're not going to be available? What are you going to do on those days with your dog? Now, of course, if you're planning ahead and got things organized, you can divvy up these activities. If there's other people in your home that are able to take care of those things, they could take the dog out for an adventure walk, because that's a great way to help the dog feel fulfilled and have a great day, even though he may be missing his regular routine. Taking them out for a safari, that's another excellent activity that is fun. And depending if you have children that are mature enough and the right age, and your dog is capable of going out with them, and that is a good choice, then you could put that on the calendar so the kids know that they have to be responsible for doing that. But we also have to consider things like just disruptions to their regular routine. If you have a day where you know you're going to be busy baking, well, what are we going to do that day to make sure that our dog feels happy and fulfilled, so that they're not getting into trouble and being a bit of a distraction for us? So all those types of things can go onto your dog's calendar, just to make sure that their needs are being taken care of, and that you can relax and focus on what you need to do for the holidays, because you know your dog is okay. Now, getting back to the mental stimulation part, got to be prepared. There's nothing that makes me happier than seeing a fridge or freezer that's got a section that's full of pre-prepared puzzle toys for the dogs. And depending on where they are, if they're just beginners or they're very accomplished de-stuffers, then the items that you have, how you prepare them, the ingredients that you're putting in them will be different. I could have a whole week just talking about these types of puzzle toys, and all the different things that you can do so that they are providing variety, which is enjoyable for your dog, and also making them stimulating, because they're a bit of a challenge, not too frustrating for the dog so they give up, or get upset, but challenging enough so that they actually need to focus and, excuse me, stepping in and using a little bit of management to interrupt a potential fiasco between two of my cats. They get a little jealous when I'm not paying attention to them. Sorry about that. So yeah, you can create enough challenge that your dog won't get frustrated, stressed out, or give up, but enough that they actually will feel great afterwards because they've been able to focus. And that type of brain work really helps them settle, and it makes them feel fulfilled without getting adrenalized. That's all I'm going to say on it. If you want more information, if this is kind of a new concept for you, then you can look at the topics and different sections in this group, because there's quite a bit of information. And if you want to really dive deep and get some extra ideas, I'm going to tell you in a few minutes about something that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. But a couple of other great spots to go are canine enrichment ideas and canine enrichment, or even beyond the bowl, where people are continually, like throughout the day, there's lots and lots of great posts with wonderful ideas of things that you can make, items that you've already got at home, and different ways to use the actual commercial puzzle toys. And just bear in mind that a lot of these, not all, but a lot of them, especially if they're new, will require you to supervise, and not all activities and toys are appropriate for every dog. So you need to use some discretion, test things out, try them, make sure that you're present so that you can see whether it makes sense for your dog to have these at all, or potentially only with supervision. Some items are okay to be left with the dog when they're on their own, but you really need to make sure that that's appropriate for your dog. Now, this is just a very small sampling. The actual number of toys that are available with all the different brands out there, it's just endless. But this is even just a very small sampling of the different types of destuffers. That there's treat balls, trays, different types of cavity toys. Some of them that are much harder because of their design. Some of them that are a little bit easier and more appropriate for beginner dogs. There's no excuse. You're going to be able to find a toy to use with your dog that they love. But you can also make use of things that you already have in the house. So I often am talking about using boxes and different recycling items as giving them one last job before they hit the recycling bin. But you can also use, I haven't put it on here, but things like yogurt containers. I mean, really, it's amazing. Once you start thinking about mental stimulation and making, pardon me, food puzzles for your dog, that you start looking at things in a completely different light and start to realize, wow, I think I could actually use that as an entertainment toy or a feeding toy for my dog. Another great item are muffin tins. If you've got those in the kitchen, they are great. You can do something as simple as just spreading your meal portion into the different openings, which will slow your dog down, which is great. But you can actually make it a little bit more challenging by putting different types of items on top. So they have to push things off or pick them up and remove them. The different textures and weights and shapes will be stimulating, because your dog's going to have to interact with those in some way before he can actually get to his food. So simple, and yet it can give your dog a completely new experience for their mealtime and make it really enjoyable. Now, some other things that are out there nowadays, which are awesome. Probably the number one type of puzzle, food puzzle nowadays, is what we call a snuffle mat. Now, this is the type that you can make yourself or you can buy, that just basically looks like glorified grass, where your dog can, the treats get hidden, or the meal kibble gets hidden down in amongst the fibers, and the dog then has to use their nose. Fantastic toy. There's all kinds of crazy varieties now where people have gotten really into them and are making pockets and things that they need to move around. It's almost like a romper room mat for a dog. But, if you don't have one of those handy, there's still, you still can provide that experience for your dog. Bath mats that have those, I don't even know if it's called microfiber. They're very specific. The picture kind of shows what they look like. They make great makeshift snuffle mats, and I use them a lot when I go into clients' homes. If they've got one of these that's clean, that I will use that in lieu of an actual snuffle mat. So there's no reason that you can't create a similar experience for your dog, even if you don't actually have the fancy product. Another example would be the licking mat that I mentioned earlier. Very popular because we know how much licking helps to calm down the dog. But if you can actually get them at places even like Beds, Bath and Beyond. It's amazing. Like, they're everywhere. But if you don't have one handy, but you have a food grade silicone pot mat or cooler, I'm not great in the kitchen, not exactly sure what the technical word to describe that is, but one of those little doohickeys that you sit so your countertop doesn't get burnt. Those make great makeshift licky mats too. Now, diving a little bit deeper beyond just food puzzles, there's other ways that we can provide our dogs with mental stimulation. And one of my favorite things to do is to make an adventure box. And they're very popular. There's quite a few videos. I actually have one in the group, and I've also got a guide that shows you how to build one. It's quite detailed with the clip and the guide. So I won't talk too much about it here, but let me at least say how much fun they are for the dogs, because depending on how you build them, what items that you put in it, you can give your dog one or all of the pieces in the play sequence that goes from stalking, chasing, catching, all the things that they would do if they were getting something to eat, and that are really parts of their play and are very fulfilling. Depending on the breed of dog that you have, some pieces of that may be way more fulfilling than other pieces, or they may enjoy them all. So you can cater to some or all of those pieces in the way that you make and pack your adventure box. So they're absolutely fantastic. And if you have kids in the family, adventure boxes are a great way to keep them busy. Now, the kids themselves may not be able to make the individual pieces. You may need to do that just to make sure they're safe for your dog based on your kid's age. But if they can't help out with making the actual bits and pieces, they certainly can help packing the box up and putting it together. And they can also, to keep them busy and happy, watch the dog when the dog actually does interacts with the adventure box. So it's a great activity, not only for your dogs, but for your kids. And to be completely honest, I love making adventure boxes too. So it's great for adults, not just for kids. All right. Another activity that would be great for mental stimulation is to teach a new trick. It's great for your dog's brain if you're teaching through positive reinforcement, where they need to make choices, so they're thinking, and there's a positive outcome, that there's nothing unpleasant happening in the training process. Then again, it's something that adults could do too. But if you have kids, it's a great way to keep the kids busy and the dogs busy by working on a new trick. It's lots of fun. And the good thing is, in the long run, that trick you may be able to turn into something that's really useful for everyday life with your dog. So they're not just kind of for fun and entertainment. A lot of them are actually really useful. But again, bottom line, your dog's getting a dose of mental stimulation. That's what we're looking for. Okay, now on the final note, on those days where you're super hard pressed, maybe you don't have anything made up yet. You don't have that stockpile of food puzzles in your fridge or your freezer ready to go, and you're stuck. You need to give something for your dog to do, or you know that you're going to be really busy and you just need to provide an activity so your dog will be happy and calm. Tossing dinner out into the yard, I like to call it wine and dine, because if you have the time to stay by and watch, you can have a little beverage while your dog noses around in the grass. So if you have access to a yard or a lawn that hasn't been chemically treated, so it's safe for your dog to be nosing around and eating food off of it, this is one of the easiest ways to provide mental stimulation. And the real value in this particular exercise is that they're having to use their noses. So any activity that's going to involve them having to find things with their nose, whether you're hiding treats in the house, you're tossing treats out into the grass, they're searching through their adventure box, you've given them a snuffle mat, all those activities are not only mentally stimulating because they're a challenge, your dog's also using their nose, which activates a different part of the brain and is tiring to a greater degree than a lot of adrenalizing activities. So if you've only got a little bit of time and maybe you have to skip that normal walk, then activities that involve scenting are fantastic. And the only exception for this would maybe be a super young dog. Dogs under 12 weeks of age, a lot of them, their nose isn't kicking in. They're more about putting things in their mouths. So they might not be quite as keen in this activity. But apart from those guys, just about everybody loves this type of activity. And if you're just getting started, just make it a little bit easier by consolidating the treat toss so that your dog gets reinforced without a lot of effort in the beginning. But eventually you can just scatter those all over the place, and a meal that normally would take just a couple of minutes, if that, maybe a few seconds to polish off, could take 20 minutes to 30 minutes, because after they've found the treats, they're going to go back and look for the trace scents. So it's just a fantastic activity, and you're going to love the effect that it has on your dog. Now, another thing that you can do, and again, it's a great activity for the kids, but if you're an adult kid like I am, great for adults too, is having an advent box for your dog. You can make them up yourself if you're handy and you have the time. There's all kinds of ideas online, but you can also buy the boxes. So the only thing that I would suggest is if you're going to buy one pre-made, try and find one that's got half decent treats, that they're not junk. And some of the advent boxes actually have activities, and I love those too, because not only is the dog getting the treat, but we also are providing something for them to do to keep them happy. So if you want to make your own box up, go for it. But one thing that I am going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is the dog days of the holidays, where I will be providing activities regularly throughout the week so that you won't have to do quite so much thinking about what to do. I am going to hand feed you those exercises and activities, and then you could potentially adjust them if you are wanting to have the kids involved. But I'm going to try and make all of them kid friendly. And if you want to do them as an adult, that they'll be potentially make them a little bit more challenging or be a little bit more creative. All right, so there we go. That's the dog days of the holidays. So stay tuned for that. I will be making a post, a guide, or a clip that will be in this group in Positive Dog Life. So you can just check that out. They'll be going through, being provided throughout the week. So you have lots of things to potentially provide for your dog without having to put a lot of thought or effort into that. Now, one other thing that I wanted to cover tonight, because we were talking about adding more cheer to our holiday, is making sure that we try to minimize the stress in our dog's life, because there's so much going on, whether you have a hectic home over the holidays or not, just all the potential changes in routine, the fact that there's all these strange objects, there may be people coming in to your home, and just things are going to be different for your dog, and that can be stressful for them. So it is important, along with the management, preparing our dogs and using the mental stimulation to help them be as relaxed and happy as possible. We still need to keep an eye specifically on things that might be creating stress for them. So one of them would be taking pictures. Now, you may not actually be going and getting pet pictures or pet portraits with Santa Claus, and that's fine. But for those of you that are, for sure, you need to keep this in mind, because that is a stranger. But even if you're not doing them with Santa Claus, even having guests or extended family coming over, taking pictures can be stressful for a dog. You see how often that they're looking away from the camera when you point the camera at them. It can be a little bit stressful for them. So just be mindful of that. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how to make it better, but just keep that in mind, that your dog might actually be upset about the photographs being taken. The other thing is, there's always going to be someone, whether it's a family member or a friend, that either thinks they know everything about dogs and just go about doing things without asking first if that's okay or not. Or maybe, they really are great with the dogs, but they're just, tend to be a little bit more forward, and your dog might be a little bit shy or worried about them. Another thing to consider is just all the noise, the activity, potentially the commotion of entertaining and having company over. All of those things can be an issue and create stress for our dogs. Now, your dog might be okay with any one of those or even a couple of those, but you need to remember something that's called trigger stacking. And if you're not already familiar with it, it's about the idea of specific activities or occurrences on their own may not be a problem. Your dog may be fine with that specific thing when it's happening by itself. But when we start piling them up together over a certain period of time, what can start to happen is cortisol starts to build up in our dog system. And then all of a sudden, something that might not normally have been a big issue becomes an issue. So we really need to be mindful of trigger stacking at this time of year, because there are so many new and unusual things going on that might ultimately stack up and be a problem for our dogs. So how can we work around that? Well, we talked before about management, that as much as you're able, manage your dog to reduce their exposure and their anxiety. That's always going to be your go-to, especially if you can't comfortably advocate for your dog. Sometimes it's not easy to ask other people not to do things that they, for whatever reason, just go ahead anyways. Or you may be busy, and so it's not possible for you to advocate to the degree that you need to for your dog's comfort. So in that case, management is the best thing for you to do to keep them safe and comfortable and out of the way of harm or stress. But the other thing you can do for certain things is you can turn it into something positive. Let's say if you were taking pictures, if your dog, maybe somebody that's in the picture wants to hold your dog and you know that's going to be too hard. Well, how about if a family member holds your dog instead? That would be easier for them. Or how about if they just sat on the ground and people were kneeling down around the dog rather than actually picking the dog up and holding it? So a lot of times there's ways that we can kind of work around situations to make sure that it's okay for the dog and we're not needlessly stressing them out. The other thing you can do is turn it positive. If you bring some tasty treats into that activity, then you can turn something that might be a little worrisome for your dog into something that's actually not so bad. And then the final thing you can do, if you know that it's not really, your dog's not really worried about it, but you just want to make sure that you're helping keep everything on a nice even keel so that cortisol is not starting to build up, is follow that activity up with something that's relaxing and enjoyable for your dog, just so that we can really help get all those stress hormones going back down and give a boost to the hormones that we like, that help our dogs feel happy and safe and relaxed. All right, now there's one more thing that I want to touch on before we go, which is sleep. It's so important, yet I think that it's something that's often overlooked. So our dogs need to sleep a lot more than we do, 18 to 20 hours. And it may not feel like that if you've got a young, active dog or an adolescent. Sometimes that feels like, well, that's just impossible. That can't happen. But we need to keep in mind over the holidays, with everything else that's going on, that we really help our dogs get enough rest so that they don't become overtired, and then that feed into that whole stress cycle. You know how it feels for us when we don't get enough rest, that we feel more on edge, we don't feel our best. So please make sure that your dog has a place where they can get away from all the activity and noise and have a chance to sleep and take a break. All right, so that is it for episode 3 of Hounds for the Holidays, adding more cheer to your holiday for you and your dog. I hope you found this series of talks helpful, that you've got some useful ideas. If you have any questions about anything, something doesn't quite make sense, or you're not sure how you would put it into action in your own home or life, please feel free to contact me. You're welcome to email me, but you know, to be honest, it's always best to do it in the group, because probably if you have a question, somebody else has that same question and would love to be able to get an answer too. So it's great if you can post comments, ask questions, and you know, anytime you're welcome to run ideas by me just to see if you think it's a good idea or if I have some other suggestions. That's what I'm here for. So please take advantage. So I will be seeing you in the group over the next couple of weeks, putting in ideas for you and your dogs in the dog days of the holidays. But I will take this opportunity to wish you all a wonderful holiday, a happy holiday. I hope it's joyful and peaceful. And these talks have helped give you some confidence and ideas so that you can take the stress out of the holidays for you and your dog. Talk to you soon.